Judge Judy had heard people brag about money. She had heard people threaten lawsuits, insult witnesses, and even storm out of her courtroom. But on that unforgettable morning, the entire courtroom froze when Karen Mitchell stood up, pointed directly at the judge, and shouted, "I pay your salary!" The words slammed into the silence like a thunderclap. A few people in the gallery gasped. One juror in training instinctively looked toward the bailiff. The bailiff took one careful step forward. Across the courtroom, the plaintiff, a retired school custodian named Robert Hayes, slowly lowered his eyes, gripping a worn leather notebook so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Judge Judy didn't react. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten Karen with contempt. She simply looked at her. It was the kind of calm that only comes from decades of watching people destroy their own credibility without realizing it. Experienced judges understand something that most people never do. People who believe power comes from shouting usually panic when silence refuses to move. Karen mistook that silence for weakness. She smiled. That smile would become the biggest mistake of her life. But before we go any further, make sure you're subscribed for more unforgettable courtroom stories. If you're watching for the first time, subscribe now and tell us in the comments where you're watching from, because this case is about to take a turn no one inside that courtroom saw coming. At first glance, the lawsuit appeared simple. Karen Mitchell was being sued by Robert Hayes over a home remodeling contract worth just under $12,000. Karen claimed Robert had exaggerated defects in the work after refusing to pay the final invoice. Robert insisted the project had never been completed as promised, and that Karen had publicly accused him of being a fraud, destroying the reputation he had spent nearly 40 years building. On paper, it looked like an ordinary contract dispute. But Judge Judy had already noticed something that neither attorney had mentioned. Retting beside Robert's notebook was an old carpenter's measuring tape. Its metal edge was worn smooth from years of use. The faded initials RH had been carefully scratched into the side decades earlier. Most people would have ignored it. Judge Judy didn't. Truth rarely announces itself. Sometimes it waits quietly inside the smallest object in the room. Robert stood when asked to identify himself. He was 68 years old. His work boots had been polished. But years of labor still showed in every crease of his hands. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a difficult week. The kind that comes from watching a lifetime's reputation questioned in public. Karen rolled her eyes before Robert had spoken his first complete sentence. "Oh, please," she scoffed loudly. "He's acting like he's some innocent old craftsman." Judge Judy slowly turned toward her. "Miss Mitchell." Karen folded her arms. "You'll speak when it's your turn," Judge Judy said calmly. The courtroom settled again. Robert opened his leather notebook. Inside were handwritten measurements, customer signatures, decades-old thank you notes, and faded photographs of completed projects. He carefully placed one photograph on the evidence table. "My father gave me that measuring tape when I was 19, he said quietly. "I've carried it to every job I've ever accepted." Judge Judy looked at the tape for a long moment. She didn't comment. Instead, she glanced toward a sealed evidence envelope already sitting beside her case file. Karen never noticed it. She was too busy smiling at the gallery, convinced she had already won. What Karen didn't understand was that Judge Judy had read every page of the case before anyone entered the courtroom. And inside that sealed envelope was the one piece of evidence Karen never expected anyone to find. The courtroom still believed this was a disagreement over a remodeling bill. Judge Judy already knew it was about something far deeper. She reached toward the envelope and stopped. Not because she was unsure, because timing matters when the truth is about to expose someone who believes they are untouchable. Robert Hayes remained standing, the worn leather notebook still open in front of him. Unlike Karen, he made no attempt to impress the courtroom. He didn't speak with dramatic pauses or sweeping gestures. Every sentence was simple, measured, and supported by something he had carried with him for years, Judge Judy noticed that immediately people who tell the truth usually remember details because they live them. People who invent stories often remember only the performance they rehearsed. "Tell me how this began," Judge Judy said. Robert nodded. "It started with a kitchen remodel." He gently ran his fingers across the old measuring tape before continuing. "Messrs. Mitchell wanted custom cabinets, new flooring, and structural repairs after discovering water damage behind one wall." Judge Judy glanced briefly at Karen. Karen sat with an expression that suggested she was already bored. Robert continued. "I explained exactly what the work would cost. We signed the contract together. She approved every stage before I moved forward." He handed copies of the signed agreement to the bailiff. Each page contained Karen's initials beside every major change. Nothing appeared unusual, at least not yet. "This wasn't just another customer," Robert explained quietly. "My wife and I had been planning to retire after this project." The courtroom became noticeably quieter. "We'd already picked out a small cabin near a lake. After 40 years of construction work, my hands were finally giving out." He looked down at them for a moment. Years of lifting lumber and swinging hammers had left his fingers permanently stiff. "I thought this would be my last major job." Judge Judy studied him carefully. She had presided over thousands of cases, but there was something different about Robert. He wasn't asking the court to rescue him. He was asking the court to restore something money couldn't replace: reputation. "This case was never really about the invoice," the narrator observed. "It was about the value of a lifetime spent earning trust one customer at a time." Judge Judy leaned forward. "What happened after the work began?" Robert opened another section of his notebook. Every visit had been recorded by date. Every material purchase had been documented. Every customer request had been written down in careful handwriting. "I completed every change Ms. Mitchell requested," he said. Then she asked for additional work that wasn't included in the contract. Karen interrupted with a laugh. "Because you did half the job wrong." Judge Judy turned toward her. "Did I invite you to speak?" Karen looked away. "No," Robert continued. "I told her I'd be happy to perform the extra work if we signed a change order." "And did you?" Judge Judy asked. "No. Why not?" Robert hesitated. "Because she refused." Karen immediately leaned forward. "That's ridiculous." Robert didn't even look at her. "She said she'd pay me later because she was good for it." Judge Judy wrote another note. "Promises made without paperwork often become the birthplace of courtroom disputes." Robert reached into the notebook one last time and removed several handwritten thank you cards. "My customers have been sending these for decades." One card read, "Thank you for treating our home like it was your own." Another simply said, "40 years of honest work deserves respect." Judge Judy quietly placed them beside the old measuring tape. Objects carry weight in a courtroom when they represent consistency rather than emotion. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, come on." "They're greeting cards. They don't prove anything." Judge Judy calmly replied, "No, they prove something about his history." Karen folded her arms again. Judge Judy looked back toward Robert. "When did everything change?" Robert took a slow breath. "The day I asked for the final payment." His voice remained calm. "Within 24 hours, Ms. Mitchell posted online that I was dishonest, incompetent, and had abandoned the project." He looked toward Karen for the first time. "I lost 3 contracts the following week." The courtroom fell silent. Judge Judy glanced once more toward the sealed evidence envelope, still resting beside her file. Robert hadn't mentioned it. Karen hadn't asked about it. But Judge Judy knew the envelope contained something far more damaging than negative reviews. It contained a timestamp, a message, and one sentence Karen believed had been permanently deleted. Karen sat confidently, convinced Robert had no way to prove what really happened. She had no idea the evidence waiting inside that envelope was about to reveal who had broken the agreement and who had tried to bury the truth. Karen Mitchell rose from her chair with the confidence of someone who had never expected to be questioned. She straightened the sleeve of her tailored blazer, adjusted an expensive watch on her wrist, and glanced around the courtroom as if the outcome had already been decided. Some people enter a courtroom believing evidence will decide the case. Others enter believing their confidence will. Judge Judy had learned long ago which type was more dangerous. Karen spoke before her attorney even had a chance to begin. Judge, I've owned businesses for nearly 20 years. I've hired dozens of contractors. I know exactly how this works. Her voice carried easily across the courtroom. I've dealt with people like Mr. Hayes before. Robert remained silent. Judge Judy noticed that real confidence rarely interrupts. Karen continued. He wants everyone to think he's some hard-working grandfather who got cheated. She laughed softly. But he's just another contractor who couldn't finish the job. The courtroom remained quiet. Karen mistook that silence for agreement. She pointed toward Robert's notebook. He keeps bringing old papers and sentimental junk into court because he doesn't have real evidence. Robert slowly closed the notebook. He didn't argue. He simply placed one hand over the worn measuring tape his father had given him decades earlier. Judge Judy watched every movement. Objects only become emotional when they represent something genuine. That measuring tape wasn't there for sympathy. It represented 40 years of honest work. Karen never understood the difference. Her attorney finally stood. Your Honor, my client fulfilled every obligation required under the contract. Mr. Hayes abandoned the project before completion, forcing my client to hire another contractor. Judge Judy nodded. Do you have documentation of the replacement contractor? Yes. The attorney handed several invoices to the bailiff. Judge Judy examined them carefully. Dates, downs, company names. Everything appeared organized. But appearances have fooled many courtrooms. She quietly placed the invoices beside Robert's contract. Then she looked directly at Karen. When exactly did you decide not to pay Mr. Hayes? Karen answered immediately. The moment I realized he wasn't qualified. Judge Judy looked down at the signed contract. So you discovered he wasn't qualified. She turned another page. After approving every stage of construction? Karen hesitated. Well, I trusted him at first. Judge Judy made another note. And after approving every inspection? Karen shifted in her seat. I later discovered problems. What problems? Karen paused. The quality. What specifically? The cabinets. Judge Judy looked at the inspection reports. They passed. Karen quickly changed direction. The flooring also passed. Karen's confidence began slipping. She searched for another answer. There were delays. Judge Judy calmly lifted another document. According to your own emails, those delays occurred because you requested additional design changes. Karen froze. Only for a second, but everyone saw it. Experienced judges understand another simple truth. People telling the truth rarely need to change their explanation. People hiding it usually change it every few minutes. Karen forced a smile. You're only hearing one side. Judge Judy didn't respond. Instead, she reached for the sealed evidence envelope once more. Karen finally noticed it. What exactly is in that envelope? Judge Judy looked at her. You'll find out. Karen tried to laugh. It can't possibly matter. Judge Judy folded her hands. Miss Mitchell, it matters enough that your attorney hasn't stopped looking at it since this hearing began. Karen turned toward her attorney. For the first time all morning, he wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the envelope. His expression had completely changed. He leaned closer and whispered, Karen, is there anything you haven't told me? Karen's confident smile disappeared. What do you mean? I'm asking a very simple question. His voice was barely above a whisper. Is there anything inside that envelope I should already know about? Karen looked away. No. He studied her face for several long seconds. Lawyers spend their careers reading words. Experienced lawyers eventually learn to read silence instead. Judge Judy noticed the exchange without saying a word. Then she calmly picked up the envelope. She broke the seal. Inside was a printed email chain, several text message screenshots, and a flash drive. Karen's face instantly lost its color. Her attorney slowly closed his eyes. He didn't need to see the evidence. Karen's reaction had already told him everything. Judge Judy looked toward the courtroom monitor. Let's begin with the emails. Karen suddenly leaned forward. Judge, before you do that, every head in the courtroom turned toward her. Whatever she was about to say would change the entire case. Karen's voice had changed. The confidence that had filled the courtroom only minutes earlier was gone. Judge, before you read those emails, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Judge Judy didn't even look up from the documents. That's interesting, she replied calmly. A few minutes ago, you said this evidence couldn't possibly matter. Karen swallowed. I didn't know what was in the envelope. Judge Judy slowly raised her eyes. No? Karen forced a nervous smile. No. Judge Judy held up the first printed email. This message was sent from your personal email account at 9:14 p.m., 3 days before Mr. Hayes requested his final payment. Karen's attorney quietly lowered his head. Judge Judy continued. It was sent to your business partner. She adjusted her glasses. I'll read only the relevant portion. The courtroom became perfectly still. Don't release the final payment yet. If I pressure him long enough, he'll either finish the extra work for free or walk away. Either way, I save thousands. No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than any argument. Robert didn't celebrate. He simply closed his eyes for a brief moment, not because of the money, because someone had finally read the truth out loud. Karen immediately leaned forward. That's taken out of context. Judge Judy looked directly at her. What context would make that sentence acceptable? Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Experienced judges know that truth has a peculiar habit. It doesn't become louder. It becomes simpler. Judge Judy placed the email beside the signed contract. Mr. Hayes testified that you demanded additional work without approving a change order. She lifted another page. This email supports his testimony. Karen's attorney spoke carefully. Your Honor, my client may have expressed frustration privately. Judge Judy nodded. People are free to express frustration. She tapped the paper once. They're not free to manufacture leverage by withholding payment for completed work. Karen shifted in her chair. She no longer looked at Robert. She stared at the tabletop. Judge Judy reached for the text message screenshots. These messages were recovered from both parties' devices. Karen's eyes widened. Recovered? Yes. The judge read the first message. Karen. If you don't finish the pantry shelves for free, don't expect your check. Another message. Robert, those shelves weren't part of our agreement. I'll gladly complete them with a signed change order. Another. Karen, then maybe your online reviews need to reflect your attitude. A quiet gasp spread through the gallery. Judge Judy looked toward Karen. So your negative reviews appeared after this exchange. Karen whispered, I was angry. Judge Judy's expression never changed. Anger explains emotion. It does not excuse conduct. Karen's attorney slowly removed his glasses. He had stopped defending the facts. Now he was trying to limit the damage. Before the biggest reveal, tell us what you think. If you had been sitting in that courtroom, would these emails have changed your opinion? Comment * justice if you believe the truth is finally catching up. Judge Judy picked up the flash drive. This is the final piece of evidence. Karen immediately stood. Judge, I object. On what grounds? Karen hesitated. I don't think that's necessary. Judge Judy calmly replied, I do. The flash drive was handed to the courtroom technician. A video appeared on the monitor. It showed Karen walking through her newly remodeled kitchen with a home inspector just 2 days before refusing Robert's payment. The inspector smiled. The workmanship looks excellent. Karen nodded. I know. She even laughed. My contractor did beautiful work. The inspector continued walking. Everything passes. Karen thanked him. The recording ended. The courtroom froze. Judge Judy didn't need to say anything. Karen had praised the work privately, then publicly claimed it had been defective. Robert slowly looked down at the old measuring tape in his hands. 40 years of honest craftsmanship. Vindicated in less than 30 seconds, Karen's attorney closed his briefcase. He knew what everyone else had just realized. The case had collapsed. Only one thing remained: Judge Judy's verdict. The courtroom monitor went dark. No one moved. The video had lasted less than a minute. It didn't need to be any longer. Every person in the room had just watched Karen privately praise Robert Hayes' craftsmanship, only to later accuse him of doing defective work after refusing to pay him. Judge Judy folded her hands. There are moments in every courtroom, the narrator observed, when evidence stops being disputed and starts becoming undeniable. This was one of those moments. Karen stared at the blank monitor. Her confident posture had vanished. The woman who had proudly declared, "I pay your salary," now couldn't bring herself to meet anyone's eyes. Judge Judy broke the silence. "Ms. Mitchell." Karen looked up slowly. "Do you recognize yourself in that video?" "Yes." "Do you recognize your voice?" "Yes." Judge Judy nodded. "So 2 days before refusing payment, you described Mr. Hayes' work as beautiful and confirmed that everything had passed inspection." Karen hesitated. I changed my mind later." Judge Judy reached for another page from the evidence file. "No." She calmly placed it on the bench. "You changed your strategy." The courtroom remained perfectly still. Judge Judy continued. "The inspection passed. The photographs confirm the completed work. The text messages show you demanded additional labor without compensation. The email demonstrates your intention to withhold payment as leverage." She paused. "And your own video confirms you were satisfied before this dispute began." Karen's attorney slowly stood. "Your Honor," he took a deep breath. "After reviewing the evidence presented today, we can no longer dispute the authenticity of these communications." Karen turned toward him in disbelief. "What are you doing?" he answered quietly. "I'm doing what I should have been able to do from the beginning." He closed his case file. "I'm telling the truth." Karen's face turned pale. Judge Judy looked directly at her. "You didn't just refuse to honor a contract. You attempted to manufacture a legal defense after deciding you didn't want to pay." Karen shook her head desperately. "I was under financial pressure," Judge Judy replied without emotion. "So was Mr. Hayes." But he didn't lie. Those 4 words settled over the courtroom like a final weight. Robert remained seated. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't celebrating. He simply rested one hand on the old measuring tape his father had given him decades earlier. For 40 years, that tape had helped him build kitchens, bedrooms, porches, and family homes. Today, it had become something else, a symbol, not of construction, but of character. Judge Judy turned one final page. "There is one more document." Karen slowly closed her eyes. She already knew. It was the document she had hoped no one would ever discover. Judge Judy held up a printed online review. This negative review was posted under a false customer account. Karen immediately looked down. The judge continued. "Our forensic review shows the account originated from the same internet connection registered to your residence." A quiet gasp spread through the gallery. Judge Judy wasn't finished. The review accused Mr. Hayes of abandoning the project, performing unsafe work, and defrauding customers. She looked directly at Karen. "Every one of those statements has now been disproven." Karen whispered. "I never thought anyone could trace it." The words escaped before she realized what she had admitted. Her attorney slowly covered his face. The courtroom understood exactly what had happened. Karen hadn't merely defended herself. She had orchestrated a campaign to destroy a man's reputation because he refused to work for free. Judge Judy closed the evidence folder one last time. She looked first at Robert, then at Karen. Finally, she rested both hands on the bench. The evidence was complete. The truth had been spoken. Only one thing remained: the verdict that would leave the entire courtroom silent. Judge Judy looked across the silent courtroom. Karen Mitchell sat motionless, the confidence that had filled the room only an hour earlier completely gone. The expensive suit, the polished smile, the sharp remarks. They no longer carried any weight. Evidence had replaced performance. Judge Judy folded her hands. For decades, she began calmly, this courtroom has seen contract disputes, unpaid invoices, and disagreements over workmanship. But this case became something very different the moment you decided that destroying a man's reputation was easier than honoring your agreement. No one interrupted. Karen couldn't. Judge Judy continued. Mr. Hayes completed the work you approved. You praised that work. You passed the inspection. You attempted to force additional labor without compensation, and when he refused, you withheld payment, fabricated complaints, and published false statements designed to prevent him from earning a living. Each sentence landed with quiet precision. The courtroom remained absolutely still. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen. You walked into this courtroom believing volume could replace evidence. Then she paused. You were wrong. Karen's attorney slowly stood. Your Honor, on behalf of my client, we withdraw every remaining defense. Karen turned toward him. No. He gently shook his head. There isn't a defense left. For several long seconds, Karen said nothing. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she spoke. I made a mistake. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. No. She looked directly into Karen's eyes. A mistake is forgetting a signature. A mistake is writing the wrong date. She lifted the printed email one last time. This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. The courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Judge Judy reviewed the financial records. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. She continued with measured authority. Mr. Robert Hayes is awarded the unpaid contract balance in full. She turned another page. He is also awarded damages for the proven harm to his business reputation resulting from the knowingly false statements made by Ms. Mitchell. Karen lowered her head. Judge Judy wasn't finished. The evidence presented today will also be forwarded to the appropriate authorities for review regarding the false online statements submitted under fabricated customer identities. A quiet murmur spread through the gallery. Karen closed her eyes. Everything she had worked to hide had now become part of the official record. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. Then she delivered the one sentence that no one in the courtroom would ever forget. Asterisk. Respect is earned by keeping your word, not by shouting at the people who expose your lies. The courtroom remained silent. Even the bailiff seemed to pause for a moment before announcing that judgment had been entered. Robert Hayes didn't celebrate. Instead, he quietly picked up the old measuring tape his father had given him nearly 50 years earlier. He held it in his hands for a moment before placing it back inside the worn leather notebook. Judge Judy noticed. She understood. The case had never truly been about the money. It had been about restoring the value of a lifetime built on honesty. As Robert prepared to leave, Judge Judy called his name. Mr. Hayes. He turned. I hope this decision reminds you that one dishonest voice can never erase 40 years of honest work. Robert smiled for the first time that day. Thank you, Judge. It wasn't the smile of someone who had won a lawsuit. It was the smile of someone who had finally gotten his name back. Within 24 hours, Karen removed every false review connected to Robert's business. Within 48 hours, several former customers posted public statements supporting Robert's workmanship and sharing photographs of projects he had completed over the years. Within 72 hours, Robert received more calls from new clients than he had seen in months. Not because the verdict made him famous, but because people recognized integrity when they saw it defended. Karen's business, however, faced growing scrutiny. Several clients requested copies of their contracts. Former contractors came forward with similar experiences. The reputation she had tried to destroy became stronger. Her own began to crumble. As the courtroom emptied, one image stayed with everyone who had witnessed the hearing. It wasn't the dramatic outburst. It wasn't the emails. It wasn't even the verdict. It was an old carpenter quietly placing a worn measuring tape back into his notebook, because sometimes the smallest objects carry the greatest truth. Truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need expensive lawyers. And it certainly doesn't need someone claiming they pay the judge's salary. Truth simply waits until the evidence gives it a voice. If this courtroom story reminded you that integrity always outlasts arrogance, be sure to like this video, subscribe for more powerful courtroom dramas, and share it with someone who believes character still matters. And tell us in the comments, at what moment did you realize Karen had already lost the case?